So if you're like me, then you know how functions can be very confusing at times. Sometimes you see how functions with brackets, with one parameter, two parameters, and you even see how functions being passed to functions sometimes. So it's something you need to have at your fingertips so that your life becomes very easy because you are using functions almost everywhere. And most of the times now in JavaScript, we use our functions instead of the ordinary functions we previously used. So here I dissected our functions so that I can explain things to you guys better. The first type of out functions we have are single line out functions, and we also have multi-line out functions. So don't bother, I'm going to leave this code on GitHub so that I can glance through it at your leisure time. Okay, we have single line out functions can either return a value or they may not return a value, and that's the same thing for multi-line out functions. Multi-line out functions may return a value as well as they may not return a value. So as we see here, we have this console log, this log square root method, and just so that you see what I'm talking about, we have this output. If you notice, these commented outputs are actually what are going to be outputted to the terminal. So if I comment this, looking at our HTML here, we have the out functions JavaScript file which is linked, meaning that if we save, it's going to actually run the code which is inside this out functions. We have this first method here, log square of 5. So if you look at it, this is an out function and this is the general syntax. We have the variable here, const, we have the name of the function, we have the parameters, and we have now what is going to return, or what is going to be evaluated in the out function. In this case, it's an out function that does not return a value, meaning that the expression at the right of the arrow here returns no value, and that's perfectly fine for out functions. So in this case, when we pass log square, pass a value of 5 to log square, it's going to return the square of, which is 5 times 5, which is 25, and the output is going to be 25. Here we see that the output is 25. So just to prevent us from going back and forth between our editor and the browser, I'm not going to be switching back and forth. So I just put this output comment here so that you know the output without us necessarily needing to switch to the browser to visualize the output there. Okay, so we're back now, and let's continue the explanation of our functions. We have our functions without return values, and in this case, this is an example when you console log the result of the number squared. It's actually being console logged and it's no return value in this case. That's perfectly fine for our functions. The next case is when you want to return a value. So in this case, you have an expression to the right of the arrow that returns a value explicitly, implicitly, I mean. So in this case, it's implicit. The return is implicit. You don't need to mention return number times number. Once the expression is an expression that evaluates to a value and it's a one-line expression, it's going to be returned. It's going to be returned. So in this case, number times number is going to be returned, and we call square 5. It returns the output of this square 5 is actually 25, and it's returned from this function. So we console log the square of 5. It returns, it console logs 25. Notice these brackets here are not obligatory because the parameter here is only a single parameter. When you're using our functions and it's just a single parameter, the brackets are not necessarily around the parameter. So you are going to commonly see our functions in this format where you just have the equal to the name of the parameter and what it returns without any brackets in case it's a single parameter. But in case it's an out function which takes multiple parameters, the brackets are obligatory. If you take away this bracket, it's going to error. It's going to show you an error. So you need to ensure you put the brackets for multiple parameters. So I've gone through our functions which are single line our functions, and we've seen that they can either return a value, they can either not return a value, like in this case where we are console logging the output, or they can implicitly return a value in case it's an expression that evaluates to a particular value, is going to be returned implicitly. So we have multi-line out functions in this case, and the first case we're looking at is without return value. So this case here is a normal multi-line out function. You have the const, the name of the out function equal to, you have the parameters you pass here, and you have these curly braces now, which are for multi-line out functions. You need to have these curly braces. So inside here, you put in the code you want to evaluate, and we are console logging the area in this multi-line out function. See that here that we are not returning a value. And what's interesting with multi-line out functions is that you must explicitly mention the return value in case you are returning a value from that multi-line out function. Unlike single line out functions, which you don't explicitly mention the return type, it implicitly returns the value. In this case, you must mention the return value. So here we take in the length and width and we console log the area. So if you want to calculate area passing in 5 and 3, you're going to multiply 5 and 3 and it's going to console log the area. In this case, you notice that one we are just calling the method and it's going to console log 15. In this other case here, when you do calculate area, if you call the method calculate area without putting it in the console log, you are not going to have any output in the logs of your browser. And that's because calculate area in this case returns a value. So you can get that return value here after calling calculate area, and you console log the return value to the log of your browser. Okay, so I've seen multi-line and single line arrow functions. I've seen that they can either return or not return a value. For single line, it's an implicit return of the value in case it evaluates to a value. While for multi-line, you must explicitly mention that you want to return a value from that function. Okay, so now we're looking at array methods in JavaScript, and not to lie you, this is one of the best things I like in JavaScript. The functionalities it provides when it comes to manipulating arrays. So JavaScript has many array methods we are going to be taking a look at, and it will be good you master these array methods because it's going to make your development process very easy. You are going to come across multiple places where you need to work with arrays. Basically, arrays store objects of the same types, and in most cases, you are going to be working with arrays of objects. And we're going to be taking a look at that as well. But for a start, we'll look at just arrays of a simple data type like integers. So now, if we have this numbers array, there's a JavaScript method known as the map method that can permit us iterate through this array and perform modifications on each of the elements of this array as we iterate through them. So for example, in this case, if we iterate through this array, we can double all the numbers in this array and return a new array called double numbers. So we take the numbers array, call the .map method on the numbers array. So you see now that this is an arrow function inside this map method, and this is a single line arrow function. Notice that it implicitly returns the number squared. So it takes the number and multiplies it by 2. Sorry, double of the number and multiplies the number by 2. Notice that this is a single line arrow function, and that's why it's good to you master arrow functions. So you can as well take away this braces from here, and the method looks like this, and it's still perfectly fine because it's a single parameter, so you don't need to put braces around it. So it's going to return an array that looks like this. When you console log the double numbers array, it's going to output an array that looks like this with all the numbers doubled. So it takes 1, multiplies 1 by 2 and returns it at this position. Takes 2, multiplies 2 by 2, returns here. Takes 3, multiplies by 2 and returns here. So it returns an array with all the numbers doubled. So you're already seeing the use cases for the map method. It's an array method used in cases where you want to iterate through all the elements of the array and return a modified version of that item in the array. Okay, look at the next array method, which is filter. And as the name indicates, it permits us filter an array and return a subset of that array that matches a particular condition. So let's say we want to return the even numbers in this array. We can iterate through the array with this filters array method. So at each iteration, we take in the number we are iterating over, and we are returning, in this case, implicitly again with the array method, with this array method. So we are implicitly returning the number with the modulus being equal to 0. And as you know, even numbers are numbers which return no remainder when you divide them by 2. So that's why we are doing this check here. So it's going to iterate through the numbers. It takes 1, it checks whether the modulus of 1 is 0, which is not in that case. So 1 is not considered as an even number. It moves to 2 and the modulus is 0. So 2 is going to be added to this array. 3 is not. 4, the modulus of 4 mod 2, sorry, is 0. So it returns 4. So you notice that it returns an array with this output, and that's how you can use the filter method. So you can filter based on any condition. The general idea is that you have an expression at the right of this arrow that returns a boolean. So you can use an inline, a single line arrow function as you see here, or you can use a multi-line arrow function. In this case, if you use a multi-line, you can basically pack in much logic into that function, and you need now to explicitly return the boolean. In this case, it's implicitly returning the boolean because it's a single line. But if you use a multi-line method, you are going to need to explicitly mention that it returns the boolean, which is true or false. When it's true, that item over in that iteration is going to be added to the array, and when it's false, the item is not going to be added to the array. Okay, the next one is the reduce. And the reduce is not something you are going to be using often because it's a bit complex, but it has its own common use cases. In most cases, you can use the reduce if you want to return an array. For this case, for example, in this case, you see that we are returning an array which is actually the sum of all the elements in the array. So we iterate through this array and want to return a sum of all the elements in this array. You can use the reduce to accomplish that. And the way the reduce works is it has two parameters, the accumulator in this case, and you have the number you are iterating over. So this second parameter, this second value here is actually the accumulated value. So the accumulated value starts at 0, and as you iterate through all the elements, you take the accumulated value and you add the number of other iteration in that accumulation. So the way that works is, for example, if we start the iteration, at 1. At 1, when number is 1, accumulated value is 0. So it does 0 plus 1, returns 1. Then after it takes 1, in the next iteration, accumulated value is 1, and number now is 2. So it does 1 plus 2, returns 3. In the next iteration, the number is 3, and the accumulated value is 3. So it does 3 plus 3, and the number is 6. So you continue 3, which is 5, and the output is going to be 15. Okay, the for each is also very useful, and it's a simple way to iterate over the different elements of an array. Unlike using the for, there's the common for loop where you use the for I equals 0, I less than equal to. In that case, it's a bit hard coded, but with the for each, you just iterate through the elements easily. So at each iteration here, you have the value being passed to this parameter. So food in the first iteration is going to be apple. In the next iteration is going to be banana. So you console log, and in the next iteration is cherry. So as you see here, we're just simply using, in most cases here, we're using single line arrow functions, but it does not stop you from using a multi-line arrow function. So the general idea here is that the for each does not return any value. So if you see here, when you are doing the console log, it's because we know it returns no value. So with the for each, if you use a multi-line arrow function, you don't need to return a value. You just put in the logic you want to be evaluated at each iteration inside the curly braces. Okay, we have the find method. This one is also very interesting. As the name indicates, it permits you find a particular element in the array based on the condition you pass in your arrow function. So in this case, we're iterating through all the elements in that array, in that our numbers array what at the start. And we want to find the number where the number mod 2 is equal to 0. So we want to find an even number. In this case, there are many even numbers, but the find is going to return the first even number it finds in that array. So when the find iterates through the array and it encounters a number where the modulus 2 is equal to 0, it returns that number immediately and the find ends. So, and as I said, you can use a multi-line arrow function here, and at the right of that, inside that multi-line arrow function, you are going to need to explicitly return the boolean value you want to return. True in this case, when you return a true value, it's going to return that true value. It's going to grab that value based on that condition. So you have some odd numbers. You also have the filter. You have chaining now of arrow methods. You see that you can change different arrow methods. You can start with the numbers array dot filter. You pass in the condition, then afterwards you chain another arrow function, another array method. So after the filter, we know that this numbers dot filter is going to return us an array, and you know that after that you can chain another array method to the array that is going to be returned. So here numbers dot filter. So in this case, we want to filter and return numbers where their mod 2 is not equal to 0. So we want to return odd numbers. So this first array method applied on this array is going to return us an array of odd numbers. And we want now to reduce now that array of odd numbers and apply this other array method, which is going to sum. As we saw, the reduce has some interesting functionalities. Like in this case, we want to sum all the numbers in that array of odd numbers. So we're going to return the sum of odd numbers when we console log. Okay, so as I mentioned, array methods are more interesting when you work with arrays of objects, because in most cases in applications you are going to work with arrays of objects. So in this case, we have an array of users where each user has an ID, a name, and an age, and we want to use some array methods on this array. So in this case, we want to return users whose ages are above 25, and as we see, it's an easy situation, or it's a situation where you would like to use the filter method, because the filter method, as we know, is going to return a subset of that array that matches a certain condition. And in this case, we want the condition is that the user's age should be greater than 25. So if you take users.filter, you know that it takes the user at each iteration, and this right expression here has to evaluate to a boolean. And in case the boolean is true, that number is going to be added to that element is going to be added to the array. And in case it's false, the element is not added. So you want that each iteration, the elements which are added are elements in which the user.each, because we know that each iteration returns an object. So to get a particular property, to check a particular property on that object, we use the dot operator. So by using users.h in this case, is going to check the h property of all the users for every iteration. And in case the user.h is greater than 25, we add the user to that array. So console logging users above 25 here is going to return us now an array with the users having an age greater than 25. And in this case, there are only two users, 30 and 35. We can also apply all the other array methods as we saw. We mentioned some array methods here, and applying them on arrays of any kind on arrays of any type. So in this case, we can also apply the users dot we can also apply the find array method on this array of objects, because it's perfectly fine to apply array methods on on arrays of any type. So in this case, users.find, we want to find the user with the ID too, the user with the ID too. So to grab that particular user, we're taking the user at every iteration, which is an object, because this array is an array of objects. And this boolean at the right is going to be evaluated to check if the user's ID is equal to 2. And in case the user's ID is 2, this array method is going to return now us a particular array element. Remember that it's returning an array element. That's the difference with the find method and the other methods. The find method returns you the array element, while the other methods return you an array. So the find method is going to return you that particular user object with the ID equal to 2. So guys, that's it. That's just what I wanted to talk about with respect to array methods. And I'll invite you guys to save this as brain muscle, because in most cases you are going to work with array methods and it's going to simplify your life when you have a mastery of it. I'm going to also leave this code on GitHub so that you can consult it at any time. And if you got some value from this tutorial, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to this channel for more videos like this, and share as well to those you think may like this kind of content. And I'm going to see you guys in the next video.